before this life.
Her name is Clara, 7 years old, dark hair, serious brown eyes, a quietness that carries weight beyond her years. She lives with her parents in a comfortable home in Springfield, Illinois. Her mother, Jennifer, first noticed something unusual when Clara was barely 5. The child was sitting at the kitchen table, absently tapping her fingers against the wooden surface. Not random tapping, rhythmic, deliberate, a pattern. Jennifer listened. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, pause. Tap, tap. The rhythm continued, complex and purposeful. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" Jennifer asked. Clara looked up, startled, as if she hadn't realized she was making sound. "Sending a message," she said simply, "like I used to, when I worked at the station, when it was my job to send the messages so the trains would know where to go." Jennifer felt a chill. "What station, Clara? What trains?" Clara's face darkened. "The railroad station. In Taylorville. I was the telegraph operator. I sent messages to the dispatchers. Train schedules. Track conditions. Warnings." Her small voice broke. "Except, I didn't send the warning. Not fast enough. And the trains crashed. And people died. And it was my fault." She started crying deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and broken. "So many people died. I tried. I sent the message. But it was too late. The eastbound had already left. They couldn't stop it in time. And it crashed into the westbound. And all those people." Jennifer held her 5-year-old daughter, listening to her describe guilt and grief for an accident she'd never witnessed. A railroad disaster from another era. Deaths she couldn't possibly remember. But Clara continued over the following months. She tapped constantly on tables, on walls, on her legs. Always the same patterns, always rhythmic and purposeful. Jennifer's husband, Michael, had studied some Morse code in the military. He began listening to Clara's tapping, writing down the patterns, translating them. What he found made his hands shake. Clara was tapping actual Morse code, real messages, railroad telegrams from the early 1900s. Eastbound passenger delayed stop track washout near milepost 47 stop. Westbound freight approaching stop, clear for passing stop. Emergency. Stop collision. Imminent stop. The messages were authentic. The format, the abbreviations, the railroad terminology, all correct for early 20th century railroad telegrams. And Clara had never been taught Morse code. Never studied railroad history. Never been exposed to telegraph operations. The nightmares intensified. Clara would wake screaming about the crash and the bodies and the message that came too late. She described the sound of metal tearing, of screaming, of silence after. "I was at my desk when the message came in," she would say, her 7-year-old voice carrying adult precision. "From the section crew, track washout. Eastbound should hold at Taylorville. But I was distracted. There was a telegram for a family. Their son had died in Chicago. I was crying, trying to compose myself." The warning message sat there for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And by the time I sent it, the eastbound had already departed, already committed to the route. And 20 minutes later, the crash. She would rock back and forth, reliving something terrible. I heard the collision from the station. Everyone heard it. A sound like thunder, then screaming, then the fire bell. Everyone running. I stayed at my desk, sending emergency messages, calling for doctors, for help, for anyone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely work the key, but I kept sending. Because it was my fault. The least I could do was call for help for the people I'd killed. Jennifer contacted Dr. Sarah Martinez, a psychologist at the University of Illinois who had published research on childhood trauma and complex memory phenomena. Dr. Martinez arrived expecting a case of childhood anxiety, perhaps influenced by something the child had seen or heard. What she encountered would challenge every assumption she held about memory, expertise, and consciousness. Clara sat across from her and began tapping on the table. Unprompted, automatic, a message in Morse code. Dr. Martinez, who knew Morse code from her work with veterans, translated it. "My name was Margaret Hartley. Stop. I was 22 years old. Stop. I killed 31 people. Stop. She stared at this 7-year-old child, sending a message in a communication system she'd never been taught. Confessing to deaths from over a century ago. Using a name from before her birth. Clara, Dr. Martinez said carefully. Can you tell me about Margaret Hartley? Clara looked at her with ancient, grieving eyes. That was me. Before I was Clara. When I worked for the Chicago and Alton Railroad. When I was a telegraph operator. When I made the mistake that killed all those people. And when I couldn't live with what I'd done. Dr. Martinez felt her professional skepticism crumble. Clara had just provided verifiable details. A name. A railroad. A specific job. Details that could be researched and confirmed. Or disproven. Over the following weeks, Dr. Martinez documented everything Clara said. The statements accumulated with disturbing precision. Clara described daily life as a railroad telegraph operator in 1915, the small station in Taylorville, Illinois, the telegraph key and sounder, the message forms, the thick ledger books where she recorded every transmission, the lonely hours in the station, especially at night, when she was often the only person awake for miles, responsible for the safety of every train on her section of track. She described being one of the few female telegraph operators, a position rare for women in 1915, but not impossible. The railroad hired women because we worked for less pay, Clara explained, with matter-of-fact bitterness. And because men thought we had nimble fingers for the telegraph key, I was good at my job, fast, accurate, reliable, until I wasn't. Until the day I was distracted, the day I failed. Dr. Martinez began researching Chicago and Alton Railroad, Taylorville, Illinois, train accidents, 1915. What she found would transform this case from psychological curiosity to documented historical mystery. Dr. Martinez discovered the accident in railroad historical archives and newspaper records from April 1915, the 17th of April, 1915. Chicago and Alton Railroad, near Taylorville, Illinois. Head-on collision between eastbound passenger train No. 36 and westbound freight train No. 72. 31 dead, 47 injured. One of the deadliest railroad accidents in Illinois history. The official investigation report, preserved in the Illinois State Archives, blamed delayed communication of track conditions to eastbound passenger train, resulting in departure before warning of track washout could be delivered. The telegraph operator at Taylorville Station, Margaret Hartley, age 22. The report noted, Operator Hartley admits to a delay in transmitting the warning message from section crew. While the delay was not the direct cause of the collision occurred due to the freight train's presence on a track it should not have been on. The earlier warning might have allowed the passenger train to hold at Taylorville, preventing the encounter. Margaret Hartley was not found criminally negligent. The primary fault lay with the freight train crew for improper track usage. But the report also noted, Operator Hartley appears to have taken the incident deeply to heart and has been placed on administrative leave for her own well-being. Dr. Martinez found more. A brief newspaper article from the 10th of May, 1915. Margaret Hartley, former telegraph operator for the Chicago and Alton Railroad, had died. The cause, nervous breakdown and related complications. The obituary was circumspect, but reading between the lines of 1915 language, the implication was clear. Margaret Hartley had died from the psychological trauma of the accident, from guilt, from the inability to live with her perceived responsibility for 31 deaths. Dr. Martinez sat in the archives, staring at documents that confirmed everything Clara had said. The name, the railroad, the position, the accident, the deaths, the guilt. A 7-year-old child had accurately described a train disaster from 1915, identified herself as the telegraph operator involved, and carried the emotional burden of guilt that had killed Margaret Hartley over a century ago. Back in Springfield, Dr. Martinez began formal documentation. She showed Clara photographs of railroad equipment from the 1,910 seconds, telegraph keys, sounders, relay boxes, message blanks, Clara identified everything. That's a vibroplex semi-automatic key. We called it a bug. It's faster than a straight key for sending, but harder to learn. I never liked it. I preferred the straight key, more control, more feel for the message. She pointed to another image. That's a sounder. You listen to the clicks to read incoming messages. Some operators could read by sound faster than by reading the written code. I could do both, but I liked watching the tape sometimes. Made it feel more real, more permanent. Every identification was correct. Every technical term was accurate to the period. Dr. Martinez tested Clara's Morse code ability. She played recordings of Morse transmissions, some slow, some at professional speeds. Clara translated them effortlessly. She could read code at 25 words per minute, professional operator speed. She knew railroad message abbreviations. She understood the specific protocols for train orders, track conditions, emergency messages. A train order has to be absolutely clear, Clara explained, her vocabulary shifting to professional precision. No ambiguity. Lives depend on it. You use specific formats. You repeat critical information. You get confirmation. And you never, ever delay a safety message. Never. Her voice broke on the last word. Except I did. I delayed it. 5 minutes. 5 minutes that killed 31 people. Dr. Martinez arranged a visit to a railroad museum that maintained a working telegraph station with vintage equipment. With the family's permission, she would observe Clara's interaction with authentic 1,910 seconds telegraph apparatus. At the museum, Clara walked directly to the telegraph key. She sat at the operator's desk as if she'd done it 1,000 times before, adjusted the chair height, positioned the key at the correct angle, placed her hand in perfect position. The museum docent, a retired railroad telegrapher, watched with growing astonishment. "May I?" Clara asked quietly. With the docent's permission, she began sending. Her hand moved with practiced efficiency. The rhythm was perfect, the spacing precise. Professional operator technique. The docent translated what she was sending. "This is Taylorville Station. Stop. Operator on duty. Stop. All clear for westbound freight. Stop." Then Clara's face crumpled. She continued tapping, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Emergency. Stop track. Washout stop. Hold eastbound passenger. Stop. Please acknowledge. Stop. Please stop." She stopped, sobbing. But they didn't hold. The message came too late. They'd already left, and 20 minutes later, everything. The docent was visibly shaken. She operates like someone with years of experience. The rhythm, the precision, the professional protocols. That's not learned from books. That's learned from thousands of hours at the key. He looked at Dr. Martinez. "How old did you say she is?" 7. "Impossible. She's better than operators I've known with a decade of experience." Dr. Martinez documented everything. Clara's perfect Morse code technique, her professional knowledge, her emotional responses, her guilt that seemed to come from lived experience rather than imagination. The case was becoming undeniable. Clara carried knowledge and skill that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old. Knowledge that matched a railroad telegraph operator from 1,915. Guilt that matched Margaret Hartley's documented psychological trauma. They would visit the site where Margaret Hartley had worked and where the accident had occurred. The drive took less than an hour. As they approached Taylorville, Clara became increasingly anxious. She stared out the window, commenting on changes. There are so many more buildings now, more roads. But the shape of the town, that's the same. The way Main Street curves, the park near the center, that's all the same. They drove to where the old railroad station had stood. The building was long gone, replaced by a parking lot and modern commercial development. But the railroad tracks remained, still in use, cutting through the town on the same alignment as 1,915. Clara got out of the car and stood very still, staring at the space. "This is where the station was. The depot building was there. Red brick, 2 stories. The telegraph office was on the ground floor, on the east side. I could see the tracks from my window. I could watch the trains approach. Dr. Martinez checked historical photographs from the Taylorville Historical Society. Clara's description was accurate. The station had been exactly where she indicated, matching her description precisely. They walked to what had been the platform area. Clara moved with familiarity, pointing to locations. The ticket window was there. The freight office was there. The waiting room had benches along that wall. And my office. My office was small. Just space for the desk, the telegraph equipment, the file cabinets for message records. I spent so many hours in that room. Alone. Responsible. Until the day I failed. She knelt, placing her hand on the ground where the station had stood. I heard the crash from here. The sound traveled through the rails, first a vibration, then the sound through the air. Then people started running, and I stayed at my desk, sending messages because it was all I could do. The only way I could help after what I'd caused. They drove to the accident site. The collision had occurred approximately 3 miles east of town, at a curve where the tracks passed through a small cutting. The location was still identifiable from historical maps. Clara directed them without being told where to go. Turn here. Now follow this road parallel to the tracks. The crash was near that curve ahead. They stopped at the site. Nothing remained of the accident over a century had passed. But the geography was unchanged. The curve. The cutting. The slight grade. Clara walked to the trackside, staring at the rails. The passenger train came from the west. The freight was supposed to be on the siding, waiting, but it wasn't. It was still on the main line, coming around this curve. The passenger train's engineer saw it too late. He tried to brake. I could hear the brake shoes screaming against the wheels from the station, 3 miles away, but there wasn't enough distance. They hit right there. She pointed to a specific location. The locomotives met head-on. The passenger engine reared up. Its boiler exploded. The first 3 passenger cars were destroyed. The freight cars jackknifed. The wreckage caught fire from the locomotive firebox. People were trapped, burning, screaming. Her 7-year-old voice described horrors with the detail of an eyewitness. I didn't go to the site that day. I stayed at the station, at my post, sending messages. Calling for doctors from Springfield. Calling for fire equipment. Calling for help from every station in range. My hands worked the key for hours, automatically, while my mind was screaming, while I was dying inside. Dr. Martinez was documenting everything, but the emotional weight was overwhelming. This child was reliving trauma from 1915, guilt that had killed Margaret Hartley, grief that had somehow survived across 108 years, and the boundary of death. At the Taylorville Historical Society, Dr. Martinez had arranged access to their complete collection of materials about the 1915 accident. Newspaper accounts, photographs, investigation reports, lists of the dead and injured. The curator brought out a box of materials. Among them were photographs of the crash site, twisted metal, burning wreckage, crowds of onlookers. Clara looked at the photographs and started shaking. I saw these images in the newspaper. Every detail is burned into my memory. The destroyed locomotive, the shattered passenger cars, the people lying on the ground, 31 dead. I knew them. I knew their names. Some of them came through my station every week. Regular passengers, people I'd talked to, people I'd helped with telegrams to their families. And I killed them. Clara, Dr. Martinez said gently, the investigation said it wasn't your fault. The freight train was on the wrong track. But if I'd sent the warning immediately, Clara said, her voice carrying adult understanding, if I hadn't delayed those 5 minutes, the passenger train would have held at Taylorville. It wouldn't have been on that track at that moment. The freight train's mistake wouldn't have mattered. Those 31 people would have lived. The delay wasn't the primary cause, but it was a cause. And I made that delay. Because I was crying over a telegram about a stranger's death, I caused 31 more deaths. The curator had found something else in the archives. A personal diary donated years ago by a Taylorville resident who had known Margaret Hartley. With permission, Dr. Martinez read excerpts aloud. The 25th of April 1915. I visited Margaret today. She won't eat, won't sleep, just sits and stares. She keeps saying, 5 minutes. If only I'd sent it 5 minutes sooner. The doctor says it's nervous exhaustion. I think it's a broken heart. The 8th of May, 1915. Margaret is fading. She's given up. The guilt is eating her alive. I told her the investigation cleared her of criminal negligence, but she won't hear it. She says the law may forgive her, but she can't forgive herself, and she can't live with what she's done. Clara listened to these entries with tears streaming down her face. That's exactly how it felt. The guilt, the weight, the knowing that I'd failed, that people died because I wasn't good enough, fast enough, focused enough. It was crushing. It was unbearable. And yes, I gave up. I couldn't live with it anymore. She looked at Dr. Martinez. Is that what killed me, Margaret? The guilt? Dr. Martinez checked the death records. Margaret Hartley's death certificate listed cause of death as nervous exhaustion and cardiac arrest. Reading between the lines of 1,915 medical language, it appeared she had literally died of grief, the psychological trauma causing physiological collapse. Yes, Dr. Martinez said quietly. The guilt killed you, Margaret. Your body gave out from the stress of it. Clara nodded. I remember. The crushing weight in my chest, the inability to breathe, the feeling that my heart was breaking, literally breaking, and then darkness, and then I wasn't Margaret anymore. I was gone. For a long time. And then I was being born again. And I was Clara. But I still remembered. I still carry the guilt. It survived. Even though Margaret died, the guilt survived. Dr. Martinez's documentation of Clara's case attracted attention from researchers studying children's past life memories and from railroad historians. She compiled a comprehensive report of verified details, accurate knowledge of the 17th of April 1915, Chicago and Alton Railroad collision, correct identification of Margaret Hartley as the Taylorville telegraph operator, perfect Morse code ability, matching professional 1,910 seconds railroad standards, precise technical knowledge of telegraph equipment and protocols, accurate description of Taylorville station and accident site, emotional responses matching Margaret Hartley's documented psychological state, understanding of railroad operations, and message procedures from the 1,910 seconds. The evidence was extraordinary. But Dr. Martinez wanted to explore something deeper, the nature of guilt that Clara carried, professional responsibility that transcended death. She arranged sessions with Clara, focusing not on memories, but on emotions. How did Clara experience the guilt? What did it mean to her? I wake up some mornings, Clara said, and the first thing I think is, 31 people died because of me. Not because of Clara, but because of Margaret. But Margaret is me. So it is because of me. The guilt is real. It's heavy. It's always there. She struggled to articulate something profound. It's like, I know that I'm Clara. I'm 7 years old. I live in Springfield. I have parents who love me. But I'm also Margaret. I was Margaret. And Margaret did something terrible. Not on purpose, but the result was the same. People died. And I, Margaret, I couldn't live with that. So Margaret died too. But dying didn't erase the guilt. It came with me. It's part of who I am. And also, when Margaret didn't, Imser. And also, Dr. Martinez asked, do you think you deserved to die, Margaret? Clara thought carefully. The guilt thought so. The guilt said I didn't deserve to live when 31 people died because of my mistake. But now, as Clara, I can see it differently. I can see that Margaret made an error, a human error. She was distracted for 5 minutes. That's not a crime. That's not evil. That's just human. But in the moment, in the aftermath, Margaret couldn't see that. The guilt was too big. It swallowed everything. She looked at Dr. Martinez with surprising wisdom. Maybe that's why I came back, why I'm Clara now, to learn to forgive Margaret, to understand that mistakes don't make you unworthy of life, to carry the responsibility without letting it destroy me again. The insight was profound. A 7-year-old child articulating psychological concepts about guilt, responsibility, and self-forgiveness that many adults struggle with. Dr. Martinez worked with Clara and her family on managing the guilt. Not erasing it, the memories were real, the emotions genuine, but contextualizing it, helping Clara understand the difference between responsibility and blame, between making a mistake and being a terrible person. You were 22, Dr. Martinez told Clara gently. Margaret was 22, young, doing a difficult job. A job where lives depended on split-second decisions. You were human. You made a human error. The investigation said so. The railroad said so. It's time to forgive yourself. Clara absorbed this. I'm trying. Clara is trying to forgive Margaret, but it's hard. The memory of those 31 names. I still know them all. I can still recite them. Every person who died, their ages, where they were from, where they were going. I knew all of that from the casualty reports. And I can't forget. Dr. Martinez documented this, too. She obtained the historical casualty list from the accident. Clara recited the names from memory, without prompting. All 31, accurate, in the same order they appeared in the 1915 newspaper reports. A 7-year-old child carrying the memorial of 31 people who died 108 years ago, remembering them, honoring them, bearing witness to their loss. Railroad historians contacted Dr. Martinez. The Railroad Historical Society wanted to include Clara's story in their documentation of the 1915 accident. Not as proof of reincarnation, they weren't qualified to make that claim, but as a remarkable case of historical memory and as a testament to the human cost of railroad operations in the early 20th century. They asked if Clara would participate in a memorial at Taylorville on the 110th anniversary of the accident. A remembrance of the 31 who died, an acknowledgement of Margaret Hartley's role in her own tragic end. Clara agreed. They should be remembered, all of them, the people who died in the crash, and Margaret, who died from the grief of it. All of them mattered. All of them deserve to be remembered. The memorial took place in April 2025. A small crowd gathered near the former accident site. Railroad historians spoke about the collision and its causes. Then Clara, 7 years old, stepped forward. She read the names, all 31, slowly, clearly, with respect. Then she said, "My name is Clara, but I remember being Margaret Hartley. I remember the accident. I remember the guilt. I remember dying from it. I'm telling you this not to prove anything, but to honor these people. To say that their deaths mattered then, and they matter now. To say that Margaret Hartley carried their loss until it killed her. And to say that maybe, if we remember them, all of them, their deaths weren't meaningless. Maybe the memory serves a purpose. Maybe it teaches us something about responsibility, about forgiveness, about the weight we carry and how we learn to live with it." There wasn't a dry eye in attendance. This child, speaking with wisdom beyond her years, had honored the dead and the guilt-stricken operator with equal compassion. Today, Clara is 9 years old. Her memories of being Margaret Hartley are beginning to fade, as they often do in these cases. The technical details blur. The names become harder to recall. The emotional intensity softens, but something remains. A sense of responsibility, a carefulness about communication, a deep understanding that words matter, that timing matters, that the messages we send or fail to send can change everything. "I don't remember all the Morse code anymore," Clara admits. "Sometimes I still tap without thinking, but I can't always translate it. Sometimes I forget exactly what Margaret's office looked like, but I remember the feeling, the weight of being responsible for people's safety, the knowledge that my actions mattered. That's still real." Her parents have noticed changes. Clara is extraordinarily careful about commitments. If she says she'll do something, she does it. If she's supposed to deliver a message, she delivers it immediately. She cannot tolerate delays or procrastination in matters of importance. It's like she learned something fundamental about responsibility, Jennifer says. Something that goes beyond this lifetime. She understands in her bones that small actions have consequences, that delays can be deadly, that you have to be trustworthy when people depend on you. The guilt has lessened. Therapy helped. The memorial helped. Understanding that she was Clara, not Margaret, that she could learn from Margaret's experience without being destroyed by Margaret's guilt that helped most of all. I've forgiven her, Clara says. I've forgiven Margaret. She made a mistake, a human mistake. She paid for it with her life. That's enough. She doesn't need to pay anymore. I can remember what happened without letting it crush me the way it crushed her. The case has profound implications for our understanding of consciousness and professional expertise. If Clara truly carries Margaret Hartley's memories and skills, it suggests that learned abilities, years of telegraph training, can transcend the physical brain. Science offers no complete explanation. Professional skills developed over years shouldn't appear in a child. Morse code expertise shouldn't spontaneously manifest. Guilt from a century-old tragedy shouldn't transfer across death and rebirth. And yet, Clara demonstrated perfect Morse code technique. She knew railroad procedures from 1915. She identified telegraph equipment. She described an accident with historical accuracy. She recognized locations she'd never visited. She carried guilt proportional to an adult professional's sense of failed responsibility. Perhaps consciousness is more than synaptic connections. Perhaps what we learn, what we master, what we feel deeply, all of it transcends the physical form. Perhaps death cannot erase professional expertise or emotional truth. Margaret Hartley died of grief and guilt in 1915, destroyed by a 5-minute delay that she believed caused 31 deaths. But perhaps her consciousness, her technical skill, her sense of responsibility, her emotional burden found its way back. Perhaps it returned as Clara, carrying forward not just memories but understanding. Not just guilt, but the capacity to learn from it. Not just trauma, but the opportunity to heal what Margaret couldn't heal. The 31 people who died in the 1915 collision are remembered now because Clara remembered. The memorial exists because a 7-year-old child carried their names across 108 years. Margaret Hartley's story is told because Clara told it. In that sense, the message finally got through. Not the warning about the track washout. That message came too late. But a different message. About responsibility. About forgiveness. About the weight we carry and how we learn to set it down. Clara taps less frequently now. The Morse code rhythms are fading from her fingers. But sometimes, late at night, Jennifer hears soft tapping from Clara's room. A message being sent to someone, somewhere. A message from Margaret to Clara, or Clara to Margaret, or both to the 31 who died. The message says, I remember you, I honor you, I forgive myself, and I will carry your memory forward with love instead of guilt. Some legacies span lifetimes. Some responsibilities transcend death. Some messages take a century to deliver. If this story touched you, if it made you question what you thought you knew about consciousness, responsibility, and the burdens that cross boundaries of time, you're not alone. Every week, we explore another mystery, another child, another impossible memory that challenges everything we understand about life, death, and the nature of the soul. Subscribe to Before This Life. Join thousands of truth seekers in this journey, because some questions are worth asking. Some mysteries deserve our wonder, and some stories need to be heard. What's your theory about Clara's knowledge? Have you experienced unexplained guilt or responsibility that seems to come from beyond your current life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's explore this together. This has been Before This Life.